Is property a good investment? So from my experience, property investing, especially under construction property, is usually no longer profitable, especially if you are a millennial or Gen Z. So I'll be using my undercon Malaysian property that I bought as a case study for this video, where I'm experiencing around 800 ringgit negative cash flow every month despite having a tenant. But before we begin, this is not financial advice, it's not bashing anybody. I'm just sharing you my experience and my opinion about property investing. Alright? So there's three types of properties that is commonly bought in Malaysia. So the first one is under construction property, or the local Malaysian slang is called undercon. What this means is you're buying a property that doesn't really exist yet, or they're still building it, hence the name under construction. So the second type is subsale property. A subsale property is when you buy a house from another owner. And then the last type is auction property. So an auction property is you buying a repossessed home from the bank. Somebody else bought a property, so for whatever reason they couldn't make the mortgage payment, and then the bank has to repossess it and then auction it off to help sell the property. So those are the three types of properties that you can buy in Malaysia, but in the next section we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the pros and cons of an undercon property specifically. So pros number one, it's a brand new home. There's just something about a brand new home. When you get your keys, you get in and everything's brand new, the fresh paint on the wall, the electrical wires that's sticking out from the ceiling. It just signifies a new beginning. It's a chance for you to decorate the place up and express your creativity. The second pros is that often undercon property is very cheap to own. So when you want to buy a house, typically you need at least 10%. That is what you need as down payment. And on top of the 10%, you need to pay lawyer fees, some other legal fees, and stamp duty. So let's say an additional 3 to 5% of the value of the house. So in total, you need around 13% minimum of the value of the house in cold hard cash. So the benefit of the undercon property is usually the developer will absorb all these fees, so you only have to pay a booking fee. And this varies between as low as 1,000 ringgit, maybe all the way up to 15,000 ringgit is the common price range that I see. So if you think about it, if you're a young couple just about to start life together, buying an undercon property would save you a lot of money up front. Sounds all well and good, but beware. The developer claims that all of the stamp duty, legal fees are free, but the reality is that the developer took all of those fees and put it into the selling price of the house. So you're still paying for the fees, but it's included inside your mortgage that you'll be paying for the next 30 to 35 years. Alright, so now let's talk about the undercon property cons. So the biggest drawback in my opinion is that you're buying a property that doesn't exist yet. So either it doesn't exist at all, it's just an empty construction site, or they're building it right now and it's not completed yet. So you're placing 100% of your trust that the developer will deliver the project as promised. So during the construction period of between 3 to 5 years, here are some worst case scenarios that could happen to you as an investor or property owner. Number one, the developer can go bankrupt and then they stop building. Number two, the developer could be dishonest, take everybody's money and run away. And number three, the finished product looks nothing like how it was marketed. So nothing in life is guaranteed. Even all these developers guarantee to you as a property investor. But what you can do to minimize your risk is to do a thorough research on the developer itself. Make sure that they have really good history, they have all these past projects that they've delivered, and you actually go and see these past projects and see what it looks like, see how it's managed. I would avoid buying any property from a company I've never heard of or a brand new company. I think that's very high risk. Okay, the second con, there's a lot of marketing gimmicks. So for example, cashback. Right now in Malaysia, there's so many unsold properties that a lot of developers get desperate to sell their unsold units. Maybe somebody from the marketing department said, hey, why don't we offer cashback? Now a cashback is a great marketing gimmick. Let's say you buy a undercon property that costs 500,000 ringgit, for example. If you buy this property, all of the buyers will get 50,000 ringgit in cashback each. Now this sounds very attractive because if you think about it, how long does it take for you to save 50,000 ringgit? Think of all the possibilities that you can do with that money. A, you can withdraw it as cash and spend however you like. 2, you can use that money to repay back your loan mortgage, which can reduce your interest rates, but let's be honest, nobody's going to do this. And 3, you can use that money to renovate your new home. Sounds all well and good. However, cashback is not free money. I'm no expert in this, but this is how I think it works. What the developer did was that they increased the selling price of the house by 50,000 ringgit, which is the cashback amount. And then when you apply for the loan, they give you back that 50,000 ringgit. So if you think about it, it's almost like taking a personal loan at the bank for 50,000 ringgit, but you're repaying that back in the next 30 to 35 years. I don't think that's really smart. So personally, I would avoid any property that was marketed with a cashback. Okay, the next cons is you have to pay progressive payment until the construction is completed. So when you buy a regular house, let's say a sub-sale property, you have to apply for a mortgage at the bank. The moment the money is released to the seller, you have to start paying your mortgage payment. So for example, a property that costs 470,000 ringgit, your monthly mortgage repayment is probably around 2,000 ringgit. For an undercon property, however, it's not that straightforward. The bank will release money to the developer in stages. During the first stage, the bank releases the first 10%, so you have to pay interest on that 10%. And then they release more money, your interest payment becomes higher and higher. For me, the first stage, I had to pay interest about 70 ringgit a month, which is very low. But the following next few months, I get letters from the bank that says the construction is moving on to the next stage, therefore my progressive payment will also increase. So it started from 70 ringgit, then it went up to 100 something. A couple of months later, it went up to 500. Then a couple of months later, it becomes 1,000 something. And then all the way until it's completed 3 years down the road, where I have to pay the full mortgage amount, which is 2,000 ringgit. So during those 3 years, you're bleeding every month. So you can't rent out your property, you can't sell it. There's nothing you can do. You just have to sit there, pay your mortgage, and hope to dear God the developer won't go bust or run away with everybody's money. Pretty scary stuff. So let's say after 3 years, you've been paying your progressive payments like a champ. Even though most new homes will have quality checks, a lot of minor things will slip through the cracks. So the developer will have about 1 year of a warranty period where the owner can complain about anything they want if the construction is not up to standards. So some of the defects will be pretty obvious. So for example, this is a pretty shoddy paint job on my bathroom wall. And some parts of my bedroom wall is also not completely flat. It's a little crooked. So those could be the obvious defects. Some defects you only realize maybe at night. Some defects maybe you realize when you sleep over. Some defects maybe you realize when you're taking a shower. Some defects maybe you realize when you start to cook. So even though this is an investment home, I think it's a pretty good idea for you as the owner to actually stay there for a couple of nights to get a proper feel of your new home. So for example, my property is a duplex apartment, meaning there's 2 stories to it. So we have this one giant wall that goes all the way up. And everything looks fine during the daytime. However, when I started to install blackout curtains and also the downlight from the ceiling, then only I realized that the wall was really uneven. So I showed this to the developer, they agreed, and then the next couple of days, they fixed it. So basically what they did is they skimmed the wall and re-cemented everything and repainted it. So depending on the severity of the defects of your home, this could take a couple of months of back and forth between you and the management office. Okay, the next con. You have to change your TNB electric bill name from the developer to you as the new owner. So when you make a change, you have to pay a deposit. And the deposit will usually be a couple of months worth of electricity bills for your property. And the deposit that I have to pay was 910 ringgit. And I gotta be honest, at the time, it took me off guard a little bit. I wasn't expecting to spend that much money out of the blue. But the deposit amount will be shown on your TNB bills at the very top left corner. So your next course of action is to furnish the place up as quickly as possible. So it's time for you to go to the lighting store, go to IKEA, go buy some furniture, and don't underestimate the amount of time and energy it takes you to do this. It could take you about another 1 to 2 months to get this all sorted out. For a 2-floor, 1-bedroom apartment, it cost me about 10,000 ringgit to fully furnish the place up. Lights, furniture, everything. So when you buy furniture, most often you're not going to get it right away. So sometimes the furniture that you want is not in stock. So the furniture store has to order it from the factory. So that takes time. And on top of that, they also have a delivery schedule. So you have to wait for whenever their truck is available to deliver to you. So that might take another couple of weeks as well. And this duration will be longer, especially if there's a big holiday coming up. Because apparently during big holidays, a lot of people buy new furniture. So next, curtains. For my property, there were 2 places that I gotta buy curtains: the bedroom sliding door and the living room 2-story high window. So a lot of stores, they really rip you off when it comes to curtains. Usually I find the cheapest price to make curtains is at Nilai 3. I'm going to leave the link in the description below. So in my observation, most landlords, they put absolute minimal effort and money into furnishing their property. So good news for you, it really doesn't take much to one up your competition. So you got to put yourself in the shoes of the tenant. Let's say you're shopping around to rent a house. How can you furnish the house so it's attractive to this tenant? So you want to wow them during the viewings, right? Ask them, do you have your own Wi-Fi? Do you want free Wi-Fi? You can include that as a bonus package to be more attractive. Especially if they're a foreigner, most of the internet packages require a minimum of 2-year contract, but maybe they just want to rent for like 1 year. So if you provide the internet for them, that would eliminate the hassle of them being binded by a contract. Second, what I did was I bought an oven, because I know in Malaysia having an oven is not that common. And when you do have an oven and then they come over to do the viewing, and then the kitchen's all fully furnished, have everything there. You can bake cookies or cakes on the weekend, spend some family time. And those kind of stories work quite well with the ladies because they can visualize how they can live there. Okay, in terms of the fridge, most owners will buy the cheapest fridge they can possibly get. So those are the ones with the 1 door. So don't buy the 1 door fridge, get the 2 door fridge, because you need to separate the freezer with the regular fridge, like in a normal home. So some parts of my living room is too bland, it's too white. So what I did was I painted a featured wall. So there's a lot of places where you can get interior decor ideas. I got mine from Pinterest. You can try Instagram. I think these 2 platforms are very visual, so it's quite good for you to get inspiration there. So I'm going to show you my results right now. So here's a picture of me painting a featured wall. So the total cost for me to buy all the paint is about 60 ringgit, very cheap. It took me about 2 hours to paint this wall. And here's how it looks like after everything's done. I bought a chair from IKEA. That is the console table that I bought from Shopee and hammered on myself. And I included some small carpet that I have lying around in my old home and a bathroom mat. So it feels a little bit more like a home, you know? Here's the balcony that I put plants. I love this balcony. In the bedroom, I have a featured wall as well. And I also have a makeup table for the ladies. Here's a picture of my 2-door fridge that I bought from Tesco, I believe. Next to that is the oven. Now this is a standalone oven. It cost about 350 or 400 ringgit to buy from Lazada at the time. Now here's the kitchen. So this is a washer plus dryer. Now a brand new unit would cost me around maybe 2,000 ringgit, but this is a refurbished unit that I bought from the junk store. So I bought it for about 500 ringgit and it still seemed to be working fine even till today. And here's the dining area. Everything looks nice. So total setup cost for me, it was around 10,193 ringgit Malaysia. In USD, that's around $2,400. Okay, now everything's all set up. You spend all this money. Now you gotta go find a tenant. Here's the thing. You're trying to find a tenant. The bad news is all the other units, they also trying to find a tenant just like you. They all want to rent it out as fast as possible, as much as possible, just like you. So your mortgage, let's say, is about 2,000 ringgit. Can you rent out the property at 2,000 ringgit exactly or maybe more? This will depend. The only way you can find out is to check the online property listings. So there's a few websites that I'm going to list down there. iProperty, Property Guru, Edge Prop, Muda.my, Carousel Properties, and also Speed Home. When everybody just got the keys, the average market rental price is around 2,000 ringgit, which is the mortgage that everybody's paying. So after a couple of months, they realize that they can't find a tenant. One by one, they will lower their rental price a little bit. So next couple of months, then the rental price falls from maybe 2,000, and then the average falls to 1,009, for example. And then they still can't find a tenant. Everybody starts to lower the price even more. Now the average rental price is 1,007, for example. So it keeps going lower and lower until there's more people willing to pay to stay there. This is the reality check. So after a few price adjustments and negotiations through the property agent, you finally secured yourself a tenant. So you started at 2,000, but you secured a tenant at 1,006. That's the cold hard reality. So you're at a deficit of negative 400 ringgit each month. But it gets worse because there's so much other things that you have to pay as a property owner. So number one, if you're using a property agent, which most likely you will, you have to pay their 1 month fee. Number two, you still have to pay the building maintenance fee, which is usually the owner's obligation to pay. And then the third thing is you still have to pay taxes on your property. In Malaysia, that's like cukai pintu. So that's a lot of stuff that you have to pay. So you're actually bleeding way more than 400 ringgit every month. I'm at a deficit of 763 ringgit every month. So in a year, it adds up to 9,156 ringgit. That's the amount of losses that I'm making every year. So if you work your math backwards, if I want to just break even, I need to rent the place out at 2,763 ringgit a month, which honestly is not possible. So let's recap out my total losses here. So I spent 10,000 ringgit to set the place up. So the time between I got the keys, all the defects, and then finding, securing a tenant, that took me about 2 months. So that's 2,000 times 2 is 4,000 ringgit. So 4,000 ringgit mortgage payment for 2 months, plus the 10,000 that I paid to set the place up. That's 14,000 ringgit down. Now at this point, undercon property really doesn't look like a good idea. So what's the light at the end of the tunnel here? How can I recoup back my money? I'm no expert, but I can see 3 ways. First, you just have to keep paying and hope to dear God that the area of your property would develop and therefore more people will move in, and over time you can increase your rental price. So number 2, after a few years, hope that the property price goes higher where the profit can pay back all of your losses. Number 3, if all fails, you can't find a tenant, maybe you can move there to stay. I bet there are other people who are making a lot of money investing in undercon property, but I think those are the minority. The majority of us will probably have a similar thing with what I'm experiencing. In my opinion, investing in property is old advice. It used to work in our parents' generation where they can buy a lot of property for cheap, and then 10, 20 years later, the property price doubled, tripled, and then they're a millionaire. Yeah, it worked back then. But that no longer works right now because the entry point for you to buy a house in the first place is so expensive. It's already too expensive. What are the chances are that it's gonna increase even more after that? It could, but I think for most people it won't. So in my opinion, my advice to young people, if I can qualify to give advice, is to forget about property investing and only buy a property that you are willing to stay in. That's it. Buy a normal 3-bedroom something apartment or house. Don't buy a studio. Don't buy this weird duplex 1-bedroom apartment. Just buy a normal 3-bedroom apartment. So in hindsight, what I could have done besides buying this undercon property, now that I know what I know, is number 1, maybe I should buy an auction property instead. If everything works out, I'll get the property that I want for a lot cheaper than market price. Number 2, wait for a recession. Like right now during COVID, everybody has no money and everybody can't pay their mortgage, so the property price will readjust. So if you have money, this is the perfect time to buy. Number 3, if you really want to invest in property, why don't you try REITs instead, or REITs, REITs. So basically what it is, it's like investing in mutual funds. It's like a collection of funds, but it's specifically in property. In my opinion, you don't have to deal with managing the property, you don't have to buy the property, you don't have to deal with tenants. In hindsight, I think the REIT is much more attractive in my opinion. Alright, so that's it. This is my entire sharing. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Alright, see ya.